People ask me sometimes how I met her, and I never know how to answer, because the true answer takes longer than anyone wants to stand around for. So I usually just say, on a train, and they nod, like that's a complete sentence. Like that explains anything at all. It doesn't, because the truth is, I met her 7 years before I ever spoke to her. I met her in the way you meet weather, something you notice, something you adjust your life around, without ever once introducing yourself to it. Her name was Meera. I didn't know that yet, not for 7 years, but I knew the sound her boots made on the platform when she was in a hurry. I knew she read real books, paper ones, and that she dog-eared her pages instead of using a bookmark, which used to bother me before it became one of my favorite things about her. I knew she liked the window seat on cold mornings and the aisle seat on hot ones. I knew all of this the way you know the shape of your own house in the dark. And for 7 years, neither of us said a single word to the other. This is the story of the one morning that changed. I should tell you now. It isn't a big story. Nothing burns down. Nobody runs through an airport. It's just a train and a tunnel and 40 extra minutes neither of us asked for. But sometimes 40 minutes is all a life needs. Every story about love, I think, is really a story about attention. Who you notice. What you remember. And for 7 years, my whole capacity for noticing lived in a single train car. The third one back, the one that always stopped closest to the stairs at 5th, the 7:42 out of Elmsworth Station. I took it because it got me to the office by 8:15, which was exactly late enough to avoid my manager's morning coffee run and exactly early enough that nobody clocked it. Practical reasons. Boring reasons. The kind of reasons that quietly shape an entire decade of your life without ever announcing themselves as important. She took it, I'd learn much later, because her mother lived one stop past mine, and for 3 of those 7 years, she wrote it out of guilt, and for the other 4, out of habit, because grief has a way of turning into ritual, and ritual has a way of turning into your whole life without your permission. We never sat together. Not once, not in 7 years. The universe or the MTA schedule or whatever force arranges these things always put her 3 rows down and 1 seat over, facing forward while I faced back, so that if I looked up from my phone, I was looking directly at her, and if she looked up from her book, she was looking directly at me. We got very good at almost. I remember the October she wore a coat the exact gray of the subway seats, and for a stop and a half I didn't recognize her, and something in my chest actually dropped like missing a stair before she shifted and the morning light caught her face, and I thought, oh, there she is. I was so relieved I almost said something out loud, right there, to a stranger, about a coat. I didn't. I remember the March she had a coffee stain on her sleeve, shaped almost exactly like the state of Florida, and I spent 11 minutes composing, in my head, the perfect casual way to point it out. Something dry. My best friend Derek. Something that wouldn't come across as forward, and by the time I'd finished editing it into something I was brave enough to say, we'd already pulled into 5th Street, and she was gone into the crowd. I remember the time it rained so hard the gutters gave up, and she'd forgotten an umbrella, and I had 2. I always carried 2. An old habit from a father who used to say a man without a spare umbrella is a man without a plan, and I left one on the empty seat beside her without a word, like some kind of coward's gift, and got off at my stop before she could look up and catch me having done it. She left it in the same spot, folded 3 days later. Also without a word, that was the whole conversation. An umbrella, borrowed and returned, in total silence, like something between 2 people speaking different languages who'd found exactly one gesture they both understood. You'd think, after something like that, the ice would break. It didn't. If anything, it made the silence heavier because now there was a debt of meaning between us that neither of us knew how to repay in actual words. What do you say to someone after an umbrella like that? Hey, so, about the umbrella felt insufficient. It felt like it would shrink the thing down to something small, when the thing had felt, to me anyway, enormous. So we didn't shrink it. We just kept riding. There was a busker who worked the platform at Elmsworth, an older man with a guitar that had seen better decades, who played the same 3 chords in the same order every single morning, rain or shine, like his repertoire had frozen sometime around 2003. Meera hated him. I knew this because every morning, without fail, at the exact same chord change, she'd roll her eyes. Not a subtle roll, a full, theatrical, ceiling-scraping roll, and I started timing my glances so I could catch it. It became, without either of us knowing it, a shared joke. A joke with only one half aware it was being shared. I used to imagine what I'd say to her if I ever got the nerve. I had opening lines stacked up like books on a shelf unread. "You must really hate this guy's chord progression. I noticed you finished that book. Was the ending worth it? I think we've technically known each other longer than most married couples." That last one I never would have actually used. Too much. But I liked having it in reserve, the way you like having a good umbrella in reserve, even if you never open it. 7 years is a long time to carry an unopened umbrella. People think silence, kept long enough, turns into nothing. Erosion, that whatever might have been there gets worn down to smooth, forgettable stone. I don't think that's true. I think silence, kept long enough, turns into weight. Every morning I didn't speak to her added one more brick to a wall I was building without meaning to. Not a wall between us, but a wall around the whole thing, protecting it the way you protect something breakable by never taking it out of the box. I told myself, for years, that I'd say something eventually. Not today. Today I had a meeting. Today she looked tired and it wasn't the day. Today the train was too crowded and it would come out wrong. There's always a reasons it's not today. Until the one morning, there wasn't a today to put it off to. Until the tunnel. It was a Tuesday in November. The kind of gray that doesn't announce itself as a storm, just settles over the whole city like a held breath. I remember it was cold enough that I'd worn the coat with the broken top button, the one I kept meaning to replace and never did. The 7:42 left on time. That part was ordinary. We pulled out of Elmsworth, past the busker mid-chord change, past Meera's customary eye roll, which I caught, as always, out of the corner of my vision like a magician's assistant who's rigged the trick. Between Elm and 5th, there's a stretch of tunnel that runs almost a full mile underground. The longest dark stretch on the whole line. I'd made that crossing maybe 1,800 times in 7 years. I could have drawn you a map of it with my eyes closed, could have told you exactly how many heartbeats it took before daylight found the windows again. That morning, it took longer. The train didn't crash, or jolt, or do anything violent. It just slowed. Gently, almost politely, like it was easing itself down for a nap. The lights flickered once, that particular institutional flicker you learn to associate with bad news, and then the whole car went dark, and the train came to a full, complete, absolute stop. For a moment, nobody reacted. You could feel 80 commuters doing the same silent math. Is this normal? Is this the kind of thing that fixes itself in 90 seconds? Do I need to worry? And then the overhead speaker crackled, and a tired voice said something about a signal issue ahead of us and asked for our patience, and the whole car exhaled the specific, aggrieved sigh of people whose whole day just got rearranged without their consent. Phones came out. No signal. Not down there. A woman near the door laughed, short and disbelieving, the laugh of someone already composing the complaint email in her head. Somewhere behind me, a man started narrating the situation to someone who couldn't hear him, out of pure habit. I didn't reach for my phone. I looked up, instead, toward the seat 3 rows down and 1 over, where the only light left in the car was the gray, filtered glow leaking through the windows from emergency lamps somewhere out in the tunnel. Just enough to make out shapes, not enough to make out expressions. Meera was looking back at me. 7 years, and I don't think we'd ever actually held eye contact for longer than the length of a blink. This was different. There was nowhere for either of us to look instead. No phone screen to retreat into, no window view to pretend was suddenly fascinating. Just the two of us, and the dark and 80 strangers between us making the low, grumbling music of a delayed commute. I don't know how long we sat like that. Long enough that it stopped being awkward and started being something else. Something with weight to it. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, that's actually full. The way a held breath is full. She was the one who spoke first. I want to be honest about that because I've told this story enough times that I could probably convince myself, in the retelling, that I was braver than I was. I wasn't. 7 years of silence, and when the moment actually came, it wasn't my nerve that broke it, it was hers. "Do you have a light?" she asked, which didn't even make sense. Nobody smokes on the train. And I don't smoke at all. And I think we both realized that at the exact same moment because a small, surprised laugh escaped her right after she said it, like the question had gotten away from her before she could stop it. "I don't," I said. My voice sounded strange to me. I'd heard it in my head, aimed at her so many times, that hearing it out loud, actually landing in the space between us, felt almost like eavesdropping on myself. But I have a flashlight app that hasn't had a signal to drain the battery on. Want some very small, very useless light? Please, she said. I'll take useless light. I've been sitting here composing a very dignified complaint to the transit authority, and I can't see my own notes app to write it in. I turned on the flashlight. It did almost nothing. Lit up a foot of stale train car air and not much else. But she laughed again, a real one this time, and something in my chest did the thing it used to do when I mistook her for a stranger in a gray coat. That same missed stare drop. Except this time she wasn't a stranger, and there was no relief at the end of it, because I already knew exactly who she was. I'd just never gotten to say so. I feel like I should know your name, I said. Given the history. History, she repeated, like she was turning the word over to check it for sharp edges. Is that what we're calling it? 7 years, I said. I've decided that's officially history and not coincidence anymore. In the dim gray light, I saw her smile. Really saw it, not the half-caught glimpse I was used to working with. Meera, she said. I'm Daniel, I said, and it felt enormous and stupid at once. The way the most important sentences of your life often do in the moment you're saying them, the transit authority's 90 seconds became 5 minutes. 5 became 15. Somewhere around the 20-minute mark, the overhead speaker apologized again, vaguer this time, and the man behind us stopped narrating to his invisible audience and just sat in exhausted silence. And the whole car settled into the strange, suspended patience of people who've accepted they're not going anywhere soon. Meera moved. Not far, just close enough that we didn't have to raise our voices over the low murmur of 80 strangers being patient at each other. She sat across the aisle, one row up, near enough that the gray emergency light caught both our faces at once. So, she said. 7 years. 7 years, I confirmed. Give or take a few holidays. You remember the umbrella, she said. It wasn't a question. Something in the way she said it told me she'd been waiting 7 years for the chance to say it out loud, the same way I had. I remember the umbrella, I said. I think about the umbrella more than is probably healthy for a grown man to think about outerwear. She laughed at that, a real laugh, low and surprised out of her, like it had snuck past a guard she usually kept posted. I almost said something, she admitted. When I gave it back, I had this whole thing planned. Thank you for the loan. I promise I'll return the favor sometime. Something like that. Something that would have opened a door. What happened? You'd already gotten off by the time I worked up the nerve. She shook her head, half a laugh, half something more rueful. I told myself I'd catch you the next morning instead. And then the next morning came, and it felt like too much time had passed to bring it up, and then a week had gone by, and then it was easier to just keep not saying anything. I finished. Yeah, I know that math. I did that math for 7 years. The dark made confessions easier. I've thought about why, since I think it's because you can't see the other person's face catch you in the act of caring too much. There's a kind of bravery available in low light that daylight makes expensive. I used to time my morning around whether you'd already be in your seat, she said, quieter now. If you were there before me, I'd feel, I don't know, settled. Like the day had started correctly. If I got there first and you weren't on yet, I'd watch the doors every time we stopped, and I hated myself a little for it. Because what kind of person builds their morning around a stranger's schedule? The kind of person who's been riding the same train for 7 years and never said hello, I said. I did the same thing. I used to know your patterns better than I knew my own coworkers' names. The window seat on cold mornings, the aisle on hot ones, the way you dog-ear books instead of using a bookmark, which used to make me a little insane, and now I think might be my favorite thing about you, which doesn't make any sense, because I don't actually know you. You know more than you think, she said. 7 years of watching someone read is its own kind of knowing them. Is it, though? I asked, and I meant it honestly, not as a challenge. Or is it just knowing the idea of someone? The parts they let show on a train car at 7:42 in the morning, which isn't exactly anyone's most honest hour. She considered that for a moment. In the gray light, I watched her think, the way you'd watch weather change, slow, and then all at once. There was a year, she said finally, where I rode this train because my mother was dying one stop past yours, and I went to see her 3 mornings a week. And some mornings I didn't think I could physically get on the train. And I got on anyway. And I used to look for you, before I even knew I was doing it, because seeing you in your seat felt like proof the world was still turning normally, even on the mornings it very much wasn't. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't trust myself to say the right thing, and for once, in the dark with nowhere to look but at her, I didn't feel the need to rush and fill the silence with something clever. "I'm sorry," I said eventually. "About your mother. She passed 2 years ago," Meera said. "I still take this train though. I could take a different route now. Faster one, actually. I don't know why I keep taking this one." "I think I might," I said. She looked at me. Really looked the way people look at each other only a handful of times in a life, when they've decided, consciously or not, to stop performing the version of themselves they use for strangers. "Say it, then," she said. I felt my pulse do something complicated. 7 years of rehearsed opening lines, and none of them fit this moment, because this wasn't an opening anymore. We were already well past open. "I think you kept taking it," I said, "for the same reason I never switched to the express, even though it's 4 minutes faster and stops 1 block closer to my office. I told myself for years it was because I liked this route better. The view, or the timing, or something practical like that. But I think, if I'm honest, and it turns out 3 hours trapped in a dark tunnel makes a man extremely honest. I think I kept taking the local because I didn't want to stop knowing what your coat looked like on a Tuesday." The car was quiet enough, in that moment, that I could hear the specific sound of her breath catching, just slightly, before she answered. "That might be the most romantic thing anyone said to me on public transit," she said, and there was a laugh underneath it, but there was something else too, something unguarded. "Low bar," I said. "Public transit romance. Lowest bar there is," she agreed. "You still cleared it though." We sat in that for a while, not silence exactly, but the comfortable cousin of it, the kind two people share, once the hardest sentence has already been spoken, and there's nothing left to be afraid of saying. I told her about the busker and his 3 frozen chords, and how I used to time my glances at her just to catch her eye roll, and she admitted she did it on purpose sometimes, exaggerated it a little, because some small, reckless part of her had wanted me to notice. "You knew I was watching?" I asked. "Daniel," she said, like my name was a whole sentence of its own. "I've caught you looking approximately 4,000 times over 7 years. I did the math once, on a slow morning, give or take. I thought I was being subtle." "You were being consistent," she said, which is its own kind of obvious. Somewhere around the 35-minute mark of the stall, she told me about the near miss. The one time, 3 years in, she'd almost spoken to me. A Friday. She'd had a good week, felt brave, in the reckless, borrowed way you sometimes feel brave on Fridays, and she'd actually opened her mouth, actually gotten as far as turning toward my seat. "And then?" I asked. "And then you got a phone call," she said, "right at that exact second, and you turned toward the window to take it, and the moment just closed, like a door swinging shut a half second before you reach it, and I told myself it was a sign, that the universe was telling me not yet." "I don't remember that call," I said. "I wish I did. I'd tell you exactly what I'd have said to whoever it was. Something like, 'I can't talk right now, someone's about to change my whole life.'" "You didn't know that though," she said. "Nobody knows that in the moment." "No," I agreed. "But I like to imagine I'd have felt it anyway. Some kind of static in the air. A held breath 2 rows over." She smiled at that, really smiled, unguarded, the kind of smile I'd spent 7 years catching only the edges of, in reflections and quick glances, never head on. Head on, it was better than I'd imagined, and I'd imagined it a great deal. The lights came back the way they'd gone, without ceremony. A flicker, a hum, and then the whole car was washed in the flat, unglamorous fluorescence of an MTA train car at rush hour, and somewhere up front the engine coughed back to life, and the overhead speaker announced, with the weary triumph of a man who'd fought a small war and won, that service was resumed shortly. The whole car erupted, quietly, into the specific relief of commuters getting their morning back. Phones lit up. Signal bars climbed. The man behind us finally got to deliver his narration to an actual listener on the other end of a call. And Meera and I sat there, blinking a little in the sudden fluorescent honesty of it, like two people caught doing something they weren't sure they were allowed to do. I felt the old instinct rise up in me immediately. The 7-year instinct, the one that had kept me quiet for 1,800 mornings. The moments passed now. The dark gave you permission, and the light's taken it back. Don't make this awkward. Let her go back to her book. I almost listened to it. That's the truth I don't love telling. I actually felt myself starting to turn back toward my own seat, back toward the version of this where we'd shared something rare and then let it evaporate the second the world got its ordinary noise back. She caught my sleeve. Lightly, barely a touch, really, but enough. Don't, she said. Don't do the thing where the tunnel was one version of us and the platform's going to be another one. I've had 7 years of watching you disappear back into a stranger every time the doors open. I don't want an eighth. I sat back down, fully. Not the polite, ready-to-leave half-sit I drifted into. I wasn't going anywhere, I said, and I made sure it sounded true because it was. The train pulled into 5th Street a few minutes later. 40 extra minutes later than either of us had planned for, and the doors opened onto a platform full of people already annoyed about their own mornings, and for the first time in 7 years, Meera and I stood up from our seats and walked toward those doors together, not 3 rows and 1 seat apart, not performing the elaborate choreography of noticing without seeming to notice, just together. Two people who'd finally run out of reasons to keep pretending they were strangers, on the platform, in the ordinary gray daylight with the busker somewhere down the stairs starting in on his same 3 chords. She turned to me. I have to be at work in 11 minutes, she said, and I am going to be extremely late, and I find that I don't currently care even slightly. 11 minutes is enough time for one thing, I said. Is it? I think so, I said. I think it's enough time to ask if the woman who spent 7 years riding a slower train than she needed to would consider getting coffee with the idiot who spent 7 years doing the exact same thing. I'd love to tell you it was simple after that. Some love stories are quick, bright, uncomplicated once the first hard sentence gets said. Ours wasn't quite that. We were, it turned out, two people who'd spent 7 years perfecting the art of not saying things, and that kind of habit doesn't dissolve in a single tunnel no matter how honest the dark makes you. But we tried. That first coffee turned into a second one, 3 days later, and then into dinner, and then into the slow, unglamorous work of actually getting to know someone instead of just watching them from 3 rows down. We still take the 742. Together now, same seats, same row, no more careful arrangement of who faces which direction. The busker still plays his same 3 chords, and Meera still rolls her eyes at the exact same beat every single morning, except now I don't have to time my glance to catch it. Now she does it for me on purpose, every time, like a small gift she leaves on the seat between us. Sometimes people ask why we didn't speak sooner. 7 years is a long time to sit that close to someone and say nothing. I used to have an answer about timing, about nerve, about the particular cowardice of a man who'd rather keep an unopened umbrella than risk it not being needed. Now, I think the real answer is simpler. Some things need the dark to become brave in. Some doors only open when every other door's already closed, when there's nowhere left to look but at the person across from you. We got 7 years of almost. And then we got 1 tunnel, and it turned out that was exactly the amount of silence we needed, and not 1 morning more. I still carry 2 umbrellas, by the way. Old habit, my father's rule. I've never needed the spare since.